All right, everybody, welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. Here I am with my old intro that is really not very cool, not very slick, but as you know, I am working on that. I am working diligently on that, as diligently as I have time for, that is, which is honestly not that very diligent, but I have set the intention, so it will happen at some point. And that is kind of what I want to talk to you about today, right? The idea that, how mindfulness can help us to expand our vision of what is potential and possible. Okay, so as I've told you before, I'm doing a course right now, a 6-month course with Dr. Dan Siegel. It's called the Comprehensive Course on Interpersonal Neurobiology. Interpersonal neurobiology is a discipline of science that Dan Siegel has pioneered, basically. And he's got lots of other amazing scientists and doctors and researchers and all the clinicians and lots of people on board with his discipline of interpersonal neurobiology. And they're publishing books under this umbrella. So one of those books is actually Stephen Porges, the handbook of the polyvagal theory. And so really interesting stuff, really fascinating. I mean, really, really interesting, but really informative in terms of how we function in this world, right? Every interaction we have, right, everything we do in this world, right? Every action we take involves some level of interpersonal, interaction. And so understanding that sort of the biological function of that is really, really amazing. And so I cannot recommend this to you enough, right? If you're a sciencey kind of person and you're into this kind of stuff, I mean, you can find a lot of stuff from Dan Siegel just on YouTube, right? And he's written many of the books that I have here are from Dan Siegel. Amazing stuff, really amazing stuff. And these courses, though, that he offers are really also very, very amazing. Now, they're not free, right? I mean, the reality is that you're getting a course, though. He offers college credits for these courses. I mean, it's the real deal. You have to pass tests and everything to get the credit. It's not just some, correspondence thing that doesn't mean anything. It's the real deal from the real deal of a guy, So it's worth every penny is what I'm trying to say. But if you're not able to get into the financial commitment of that, I really do recommend picking up some of his books. Okay, everything. If you're a parent, The Whole Brainchild is one that's amazing. A parent of teens, there's one that I'm about to start called Brainstorm, which is about the adolescent brain. Right. He also has one that's called Aware, which really gets deeply into what I'm going to talk about today. As well, there's one called Mind. There's one called Mind Sight, which is basically his idea, his sort of version of mindfulness kind of thing. Amazing stuff. I mean, he's an amazing guy. So anyway, in this course, in this fascinating, wonderful, seriously like fantasy kind of level of course that I'm taking, one of the things I was just reviewing this morning is this concept that Dan talks about, right, which is really reliant on physics, right? It's kind of not reliant on, but connected to physics, right? In physics, right, they talk about this plane of possibility, right? So anything that could possibly happen, right? It's truly like in any given moment, there can be seen this infinite plane of anything that could happen, right? But now that plane becomes sort of focused based on what is happening, the circumstances of our lives, basically, right? So for instance, I'm not a bird. So the plane of possibility of me flying is not right there, right? Like I've already risen above this plane of possibility. I am not an animal that has wings and can fly, right? So but for a bird could walk or fly. So its potential plane of possibility is even greater than mine, right? Other things, right? I am not a college graduate. So that narrows it down a little bit more and creates basically, if you look at this visually in a graph, it's like this plane of possibility and has these plateaus that grow out of it, right? So the plateaus, the top of the plateau is just a smaller plane of possibility, right? It's narrowed down the amount of things that are possible in any given moment, right? And this is all based on the idea of so what physicists will talk about is that energy, right? The flow of energy is or energy itself is the change from something that is a potential to something that is an actuality through a series of probabilities. Okay? Now, what that means is that the probability, like let's say I'm in a depressed mood, right? The probability of me having a happy thought or a positive thought is very, very low, right? The potential thoughts that I'm likely to have are a much smaller plateau. Right. So as we kind of get from 0 to 100% of an actuality, right? There's different probabilities that happen throughout there, right? Now the problem with this, and well, not the problem, but where mindfulness comes into this, right, is that we can see when we are in a plateau. Okay, so we can see when our potential, the plane of our possibility has been narrowed down. Okay, and this is very, very important. Okay, because when we get to a place like, again, let's say we're in a very depressed place, right? Like our body's feeling depressed. I went through this just a couple of days ago. On Tuesdays, I've been doing this trauma work, which really beats the hell out of me. I mean, I'm like sobbing, crying, going through half a box of tissues on my desk. Like it's really, really difficult work. And after that, I'm feeling so drained and so tired and so down, right? And I know that from that place, from that physical sensation, there are only certain thoughts that are likely to arise from that place. And those thoughts are very likely to be negative. Okay. Now, here's where mindfulness steps in to the rescue, right? Because in that place of being depressed and being tired and being worn down and even being very sad from all the trauma stuff that I've been exploring all morning, right? If I can sense, if I can know that that's where my body is and that's where my mind and my energy are, then I know that automatically, yeah, all the thoughts that are going to come out of there are going to be negative, right? I'm going to think about what's wrong with my life. I'm going to think about, all the things, like maybe kind of think about things that my wife's not doing right around the house. I might see, something like it happened just the other day. Somebody ate one of the ice pops and I thought it was my son who had been, he's put on a lot of weight. And so we're trying to work with him on that. And I, again, because of the state of mind I was in, I was sure that it was him. And I started getting very upset about it. And I started getting frustrated. It turns out it was his sister that took the ice cream, who's not having this weight issue. And it's not a problem, right? That's where mindfulness comes in. Right. When and it worked the other day, by the way, right. I looked at the ice cream. I saw the wrapper in the garbage and I was like, oh man, dude, you took you took an ice cream. We're supposed to be watching how much we eat and not eating between meals. We're trying to work on this. But here's the thing. My mindfulness training allowed me to see that I am likely to think that about my son. Right? That is where my brain is going to go. That is where my thoughts are going to travel. That is where the energy and the information in my body is going to flow to that result, to that end terminal that says, gosh, my son took the ice cream. I'm so disappointed, right? Now, if I'm unaware of this, if I am just unintentional and just kind of going along with it, well, then I'm very likely to say, hey, call my son in and berate him over it, maybe, right? I don't have to berate him, right? But that is a potential, right? Given my mood, given my state of mind in the moment, given the stress levels that I'm going through, how do I have a meeting starting in 5 minutes? These things are all going to impact how I then talk to my son about it, right? And if I'm aware of this, however, right? So, okay, let me keep going on that scenario where I'm not aware of it. Right now, I call my son in. I may be talking in a kind of harsh way, and I lose my patience with him. I'm gonna feel shame from that later on, right? And it was all based on something that wasn't even true, right? So I'm damaging my son. I'm damaging myself. I'm damaging our relationship with that, which then needs to be repaired, all over something that wasn't even true, right? So that's the unintentional and unaware way in which people do go through this process. It happens every single day. Believe me, I've coached them. I know, okay? So let's look at how this happens with mindfulness, which is what happened to me the other day. Now, granted, yes, I've been practicing mindfulness for a long time now, and I'm really good at it. Thank you very much, right? But you can get good at it too, right? It is not a linear thing. This scenario might happen to you after 2 weeks of practicing mindfulness. It's impossible to tell, okay? But here's what happened. Instead, when I saw that ice cream wrapper, right, I acknowledge that, wait a minute, Art, you're in this very negative, and it's not something I'm going to talk it through like it's this narrative happening, but it didn't happen that way. And that's an important aspect of this, right? That as we practice this, we build the skill, just like you don't think a soccer player, a professional soccer player, right? They're not going there and saying, okay, kick the ball, put it on my knee, put it on my head, let me kick it over to this guy. They're just doing it, right? It's just flowing, right? It's flowing because they have practiced it so many times, right? Same thing. I always use I don't know why I went to soccer this time. Normally I use the metaphor and the illustration of driving a car, right? If you can remember back to that first time you drove a car, right? You're squeezing the steering wheel. You had to make sure all the mirrors were right. You were so nervous about all the different things, this checklist of things that you had to do before you started rolling the car, right? Now, in all likelihood, I could toss the keys to you across the room. You snatch them out of the air like some kind of movie. You'll jump in that car and drive off without thinking twice about it, right? That's because you've practiced it. Okay, so the same thing happens with mindfulness. It's not like we have to stop and say, oh, wait, think about the potential, think about your mood, think about this thing. No, it just flows, right? Because it's a skill, okay? So because I have this skill, when I saw that ice cream, I paused for a moment. And I said, don't go with the automatic thought that you have, because that automatic thought is coming from all the stuff that you're dealing with right now, right? The trauma work, the stress in general, right? The homeschooling and all of it, right? So don't believe that first thought that comes to your mind, right? Even though it seemed like it could not be any other way, right? That's what my son does, right? He eats stuff in between meals, and my daughter doesn't really, And so it seemed for all the world that this was obvious. Like literally in that moment, you could not have convinced me that it was not him, right? And even with this understanding, right, with the full belief that it was him who ate the ice cream, I still paused and I said, don't do it, right? Acknowledge that if he cheated on his diet, he cheated on his diet, and so would you, right? And so what I do then is I drop myself back down closer to this open and vast plane of possibility, right? Or as physicists would call it, the quantum vacuum, which I love that. I feel like that should be the name of a band, right? Quantum vacuum. Oh, it's so cool. But that's what it is, right? The quantum vacuum is where anything is possible, right? Like you can say anything, you can do anything, you can hear anything, you can believe anything, right? It's a vacuum. But again, that vacuum starts to get filled up with things. And as it gets filled up, that potential becomes smaller and smaller and smaller as the probability rises and rises and rising to that 100% actuality, right? So mindfulness practices, what they enable us to do is to remain down in that wider, more open and vast understanding that things can work out in many different ways in any given circumstance. And again, though, it's important, right? This is really, really important here. It is not the kind of thing where you have to stop yourself and remind yourself, because you can't do that when you're in that place of stress and reactivity or anger or depression or whatever it might be, right? When we go into those physical and mental states, we don't remember to say those things to ourselves, right? And that's where we just barrel forward. We damage relationships, we damage ourselves, our bodies, our jobs, our money, the whole thing. We're doing that because we're unaware as it's going on, right? And so again, it's never the question of just remember to be mindful. That doesn't work. It never works. I mean, it might work here and there for some smaller stressors and stuff like that. But there's a point at which for everyone, that crap goes out the window and it's just not going to work. So that's where we have to practice it, right? When we practice it every day, right? Like similarly, like you might have a hard time describing to someone, like if you were in like that classic, like, the airline, the plane's going down and somebody in the control tower has to talk the person down. If you had to try to talk somebody into, through the process of driving their car, you'll probably forget a few things, right? You probably won't mention something about the mirror, right? Because it's so automatic for you. It's so ingrained in you. It's not part of your conscious memory or thought pattern. It's part of your implicit memories, your implicit thought patterns. So that's why it's got to be practiced. You didn't get that anyway except driving your car so many different times, right? It's not like you took a course on how to make this automatic. It became automatic through the repetitive practice. And the same thing happens for mindfulness practice. When you take even a few minutes every day, but hopefully more than a few minutes every day, and you keep coming back to it and you keep practicing and practicing and practicing, that's when it becomes something that is truly ingrained in you and part of your implicit, motivation. And that's when you find, and this is one thing that I hear from every single client, and I heard it from myself too. You find at some point you see yourself doing something almost like you're watching somebody else do it. Like that's how automatic it becomes. And again, this is all trainable through simple practice day by day. If you want to know more about those practices, there's a link in the description. I can help you to learn these practices. I can help you to develop a daily practice so that you develop these skills that are going to aid you in every scenario of your life. So I promise you. All right. So now on to the next segment where we're going to talk about I'm going to talk about the storytelling mind in the next segment. So I'll see you over there. Have a great day, or I'll see you in a bit. Just a slight change of plans today on the second segment here. Okay, tomorrow I'm going to do a segment about the storytelling mind because it is a very important segment to do. It's important information. But today, because the first segment was really about why we practice mindfulness, in the second segment, I want to take a moment or 15 minutes and tell you about how we can practice mindfulness. Okay. I know I've talked about this before, obviously, but I always tell you in the intros here that in this podcast, we talk about the practices, and it's been a minute. Okay. It has been a minute since we've talked about practice. And so let's go over it again. Let's do a little refresher course, shall we? Okay. So basically there are 3 ways in which we can practice mindfulness. Okay. We can practice it formally, we can practice it informally, and then we can practice it in a way that I consider semi-formally. Okay. Now, in any way in which we're practicing these, okay, there are 3 kind of concepts or 3 skills that we're developing. Okay. We are developing the skill of, and this is very closely tied into what Dan Siegel works on in his Mindsight Institute, right? And I'm going to use his designations for this. It doesn't have to be his designations. We could label these in many different ways. But what he talks about is when we're training ourselves in open awareness, in focused attention, which is really focused awareness, right? But we call attention that focused aspect of inside the scope of our awareness, right? So open awareness, focused attention / awareness, and kind intention. Okay. Now, that is what each one of the formal, informal, or semi-formal are all developing those three skills. Okay, that's what it is. That's the whole thing, right? Open awareness is the ability to ground ourselves into the present moment. I hear that stuff that's happening outside, right? I can hear that my cat just slammed the door because I know I'm alone, but thankfully I know that my cat likes to slam the door, and so I'm not afraid that there's somebody else in the house with me, right? Right? Like I'm grounded, and I hear that, and I'm able to be a conduit for what is happening around me, right, and inside of me, right. I'm aware of it all, right. It's all within my awareness, right. I'm not so focused on my own thoughts and my own worries and stuff that I don't even hear the door slam and there's some psycho in the house that's going to kill me, right. I'm kidding, of course. So that's the open awareness, right. The focused attention is the ability to say, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to the birds outside. I'm going to focus on what I'm doing here, right? Because this is important. What I have to finish this, and then I'll go listen to the birds, right? And then the kind intention is the ability to do all of this, right? To hold this awareness and to pay this attention, but doing it in a way that is sort of appreciative and sort of kind to ourselves and to what's happening around us, almost like having compassion for our moment by moment experience, right? So just like, and it can be very simple in terms of just understanding that, there's never going to be another moment that's just like this one. There's never going to be. So I can pay attention to it with that sort of gratitude, with that appreciation. Okay. So how do we practice these three things, right? Well, formally, it's called meditation, right? Now, technically, all of these things are meditation, but in the world of society at large, we tend to call meditation being this formal practice. Now, in a formal meditation practice, I'm going to give you the instructions really simply, really quickly here. Obviously, hit the link if you want to, learn more, but it really is this simple. Okay. First step is bringing awareness to your position of your body, right? And yes, it is not going to work as well if you can't see me on the podcast, but I'm like sitting back in my chair here in my office. I'm like hanging my head. I got my arm hanging off the side. My other arm is like almost scratching against the floor. I can't meditate in this position. Okay. This is not going to work, right? Mostly I'm probably going to get like my hand is going to fall asleep. My back is going to get sore, or, if we're just like lying back in a big cushy chair or couch, I might fall asleep, right? And in meditation, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fall awake, not fall asleep. That's a line from a guy named Muscara, Corey Muscara, I believe his name is. He's another mindfulness teacher on YouTube. So had tip of the hat to Corey for that, falling awake. He also is, I tipped my hat to him. He's the one that I learned upright but not uptight, because now that's the next thing, right? That our position of our body should be upright but not uptight. The way it's described more traditionally is a position that is both relaxed and alert at the same time. Now, here's the thing. It's whatever that means to you, right? There's no right or wrong way to be relaxed and alert at the same time. It's just, try to get into that position, right? Next, we're going to make sure that our hands are on our legs and are in our lap or on our knees, and we're going to make sure that our feet are flat on the floor. And if we like to, we can close our eyes. There's a way to do it with your eyes open, but most people prefer to close their eyes. It's pretty easy to do that way, right? Now, what we're going to do is we're just simply going to bring our awareness to our breath. Right? And you can do this in a number of ways. You can either pay attention to the sensation, and really it's not thinking about the breathing, right? It's really just feeling the breath, sensing the breath. Okay, so you can sense that in one of three places. Either in your abdomen, in the extension and retraction of your abdomen with each in-breath, each out-breath, with the rising and falling of your chest, right, which I don't really recommend that one for other reasons, but we'll talk about that another time, or in the feeling of the air coming in and out of your nose. A typical thing that they suggest you watch is you can pay attention that the air is cold coming in and warm coming out. right? Just paying attention to that, right? Just focusing yourself on that, right? Now, when your mind wanders, and I don't say if, I say when, because it's going to wander, right? You'll be sitting there for 30 seconds, focusing on your breath. It's going great. You're feeling great. You're dialed in 45 seconds, 48 seconds, 52 seconds. And all of a sudden, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Do I have the stuff I need for dinner in the refrigerator? I should have stopped and bought whatever, right? And then you just boom, 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 boom. You know what? I need a vacation. If I go on vacation, I shouldn't buy too much eggs and milk, right? And like boom, boom, boom. The mind just goes and goes and goes and goes, right? So now the question is just noticing. As soon as you notice that your mind is doing that and you're no longer paying attention to your breath, in any one of those three places, and pick one. Don't jump from one to the other. Pick one, especially as a beginner. But when I realize I'm no longer paying attention to my abdomen, but instead thinking about what's in my refrigerator, now I just very simply and very kindly and compassionately, gently, I notice that I'm no longer paying attention to my breath, and I just bring myself back. Okay? Now, that's the formal practice. And that's there are things that we can add on, that I do add on as I teach people, that enhance that process. And I'll teach you those things too. But that's it. That really is the practice. You can do just that every day for even just a few minutes a day, and you're going to see amazing differences in your ability to hold your attention, to ground yourself into that plane of possibility that we talked about in the last segment, right? All the benefits that you can get out of mindfulness training are going to come out of just doing what I just talked about for a few minutes a day. I mean, ultimately, you want to be like 5 to 15 minutes a day, but starting out with just 1 minute is good enough to start, right? Now, informal practice, right, is doing that same thing, but with the other tasks that we have going on in our lives, right? Now, anything. It can be an opportunity for practicing mindfulness. A very traditional and common way that we do it is brushing the teeth. Most people brush their teeth in the morning and the evening, right? So it's a great built-in opportunity, right? So while you're brushing your teeth, and you can try this tonight, right, or the morning, whatever, as you're brushing your teeth, right? And now, again, brushing your teeth is one of those things, just like driving. You've done it so many times, you don't think about it, right? So just because you're not thinking about brushing your teeth doesn't mean that your mind's not thinking, right? You're thinking about something, and generally speaking, those things are going to be things that cause you stress and anxiety and difficulty and suffering. So we can let those go, right? You're not going to miss them, okay? I promise you, they're not helping you. So the way we do that now is we simply pay attention to brushing our teeth. Right now, the way that I love to train people, at least in the beginning, is pay attention to the sound. Right? The sounds of the toothbrushing is very distinctive, right? There's a very distinct difference from the outside of the lower right part of my mouth to the inside of the upper left, right? That sound inside that I pick up from my eardrum, from within inside my head, at least partially. Some of it's outside, some of it's inside. It's very, very varied and extremely distinctive, and something that I can pay attention to. And now again, the same process, right? As soon as I realize that I'm thinking about this meeting that I have at 3:30 in the afternoon, and I'm not paying attention to the sound that my toothbrush is making, I just recognize it kindly, compassionately, and bring my attention back. Now, you can do this brushing your teeth, taking a shower, driving your car, making coffee, making tea, cooking, shopping, eating, all of it. Right? 95% of the things we do every day, we don't have to think about. So any one of those can be just like what I described. Now, a semi-formal practice is when I teach everybody that I work with the pause, right? Now, my clients all come up with different sort of acronyms. One person has SET, which is sensation, emotion, thought. Another person has BET, which is body, emotions, thoughts. And so tell me what you come up with, right? But the idea is that for, say, 4 or 5 times a day, just stopping what you're doing just for a second, right? And you can do this on the fly, right? You don't have to tell everybody, okay, I'm doing a pause here, right? You can do it like in the middle of a meeting, right? Just for 30 seconds, just check in with your body, check in with your emotions, check in with your thoughts, right? And the thing about that is that semi-formal practice becomes a really beautiful informal practice automatically, because after you pause 4 or 5 times a day for a couple of weeks, what happens every time, my clients tell me every single time, they get to the point where my body's just doing it. Like, I'm not trying to pause, but I'm pausing all the time. It's happening automatically. All right, folks. So if you need help beyond this, and I've only given you a brief overview here, so there's a lot more to talk about. So if you're interested in learning one or all of these practices, click the link below and let me talk to you for 45 minutes. It won't cost you a thing. I promise I'll inspire you to move forward. All right? And there's lots of different ways you could do that. There's group session. I got a couple of group programs coming up very shortly. There's also the free session that I do every Wednesday night. There's also one-on-one, which is the most, kind of customizable option, and therefore the most pricey one. But there's lots of different opportunities. I'm here to try to help as many people as I can. I don't want $1 million from one person. I want $1 from 1,000,000 people. Okay? All right, everybody. I wish you well, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I'll be back in tomorrow. Take care.